I'm Cormac O'Malley, son of General Ernie O'Malley. Welcome to Ernie's Journey, the monthly series where I share stories about my father's role during the Irish War of Independence and the Irish Civil War from 1920 to 1924. How he left studying medicine to train thousands of volunteers to fight the British, and he rose to the highest ranks of the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, by age of 23. How he was imprisoned, tortured, and escaped. These are some of the stories. Welcome to Ernie's Journey.
In this episode, I'll be covering two aspects. One is how did the IRA, in fact, create an attack on a barracks? And secondly, what was Ernie's role in the attack on the Hollyford Barracks on May 8, 1920? So, we must ask ourselves, how did a group of farming community people bring off any attack on any RIC barracks? This was an incredible achievement. They were attacking one of the pillars of their society. Over the years, the RIC was an established place, highly regarded. Now it had become a place where the IRA, if successful, could get arms, ammunition, grenades, pistols, so they started to attack them. The question was how. So to give you a concept, it usually took more than 100 people from 4 or 5 different battalions surrounding the town. Now, they didn't use a battalion within the town because if the RIC were identifying people, they could identify who was on the raid. So people from outside the town were usually used. Over 100 people would have been assembled. They would have all had specific jobs, such as cutting down trees in order to block the roads. They would have cut the wires on the telephone wires so that communications could have been made. They had placed scouts on the outskirts to alert the men of any troop movements that might occur. I should say that all of these events occurred usually starting late at night and going through early morning, and the chances are that British troops were not out in their tenders during those hours. Also, the men had to gather supplies that were needed for the raid, such as ladders, buckets to carry the fuel, hammers to break the slates, drills, and also preparing the explosive that were going to be dropped from the roof, grenades and bombs. Also, they assigned people to take care of or quarantine any suspected people in the village. They didn't want those suspects to warn the RIC, and so they kept them silent and guarded. They also had scouts on the outskirts of the houses to figure out who was moving from house to house. And, interesting little footnote was, as the men approached the barracks, they would have to take their boots off in order not to make noise. So these are some of the massive details that was involved in any attack on a particular instance. Now, I also wanted to talk about what Ernie did in Hollyford. Hollyford was the first of 3 attacks, Hollyford, Drangan, and Rare Cross in Tipperary. Seamus Robinson, commander of Tipperary's famous 3rd Brigade, and Sean Tracy, who was vice commandant, had talked to Michael Collins and asked Michael Collins to send Ernie O'Malley as an organizer to Tipperary. It shows that they had known what Ernie had done elsewhere, and they wanted to use him to assist in their training and other matters in Tipperary. When Ernie came in late April 1920, he was fairly busy as an organizer, doing his work on the brigade staff, the battalions and the companies, and he would go from area to area. Meantime, local people had organized the Hollyford attack. It was only when Ernie came to Hollyford and was alerted that this was going to go on that he was included in the management of the attack. Now, in that particular day, it started at 11 o'clock at night. The trees were felled, as I mentioned. All of these precautions had occurred. The ladders were brought against the end of the barracks. Ernie and Seamus Robinson climbed up on the barracks. They had to put petrol, break the slates with their hammers, break the slates, and then throw petrol in. Now, petrol by itself obviously doesn't catch flame, so they would have to light a piece of turf and first of all get that lit and then throw the turf in to see if the fire could start on the barracks. They were up there for several hours, and time and time again, despite their valiant efforts, the flames increased, but they didn't penetrate the attic. And so the RIC who were down there, though they were in one part of the house, they've clearly feared for themselves, but it was never enough for them to force a surrender. So sadly, after 5 hours of work of this type, and knowing that it might be time for British troops to come around, they withdrew. So one of the important things here was not the success of Hollyford, whether they got the arms or not. What it was a challenge of organization. It was a point of pride that these people were able to bring off and attacking such a important part of their community. And the fact that they didn't get arms that night meant that perhaps the next time, with the same organization, they would be able to do so. And so, do join me for my monthly updates on Ernie's journey.